In the blood-soaked era of the warring states, silence was a sin. To be a warrior was to be a performer on the grandest, cruelest stage of all. Men did not merely fight to survive, they fought to be seen. Before the steel kissed the flesh, a samurai would scream his lineage to the heavens, listing the deeds of his ancestors, begging the gods of history to witness his death. To die unknown was the ultimate shame. To be forgotten was a fate worse than the fires of hell. Honor was not a private virtue. It was a public spectacle. It was gold foil wrapped around a rotting corpse. The daimyos built castles that scraped the sky, not to protect their people, but to cast a shadow over them, a physical testament to their own importance. Glory was the air they breathed, and vanity was the water they drank. Yet, amidst this deafening cacophony of egos, there walked a singular anomaly, a shadow that moved against the blinding light of the era. Miyamoto Musashi. He was a man who held the power of life and death in his hands, a demon who had walked through 60 duels and emerged with his breath steady. By the laws of his world, he should have claimed a high seat at the shogun's table. He should have worn the finest silks, surrounded by sycophants chanting his name. The world was ready to carve his statue. The world was ready to give him the immortality that every other man bled for. But Musashi looked at the throne of fame, and he saw only a trap. He saw the gilded cage that turns a wolf into a lapdog. While others scrambled to etch their names into stone, Musashi turned his back on the world. He chose the mud. He chose the rain. He chose the terrifying, abyssal silence of being nobody. He understood a truth that we are still too afraid to whisper, that the loudest man in the room is the one most terrified of the quiet. To possess a name is to carry a burden heavier than the sharpest steel. Consider the nature of this poison we call renown. It begins as a sweet nectar. To be recognized, to be feared, to be adored, it feeds the starving beast of the ego. It tells a man that he matters. But Musashi saw the rot beneath the sweetness. He saw that praise is not a crown, it is a collar. When a warrior fights for glory, he is no longer free. He becomes a slave to the expectations of the crowd. Every strike he makes is calculated not for efficiency, but for effect. He begins to fear the shame of defeat more than death itself. And in that fear, the spirit becomes rigid. The mind becomes cluttered with the noise of what if? What if I fall? What will they say? What will become of my legacy? This is the tragedy of the famous man. He spends his life building a fortress of reputation, only to realize he has become a prisoner within its walls. He must smile when he wishes to weep. He must stand tall when his knees buckle. He ceases to be human. He becomes a symbol, a hollow effigy polished for the amusement of others. Musashi looked at the great lords of his time, men suffocated by their own grandeur. They were surrounded by armies, yet they lived in perpetual terror. They trembled at a whisper of disrespect. Their strength was a brittle shell, easily shattered by the slightest blow to their pride. He understood that true mastery requires total abandonment. To move with the fluidity of water, one must have nothing to protect. No image, no status, no legacy. When you are nothing in the eyes of the world, you have nothing to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature under the heavens. He rejected the poison. He spat out the wine of admiration. He chose to remain a Ronin, a wave man, drifting without a master, and more importantly, without an audience. For he knew that the moment you bow to the applause, you have surrendered your sword to the crowd. And then, there was the shadow's greatest foil, the demon of the western provinces, Sasaki Kojiro. If Musashi was the earth rough, dirty, and unyielding, Kojiro was the sky. He was the perfect samurai. He was the idol that every young warrior aspired to become. He wore the finest silks that whispered in the wind. His hair was groomed to perfection. In his hand, he held the drying pole, a blade of impossible length and beauty, a weapon that demanded not just skill, but an audience to admire it. Kojiro was the embodiment of the external. He lived for the duel. He lived for the reputation of his swallow cut. He stood on the sands of Ganryu Island, waiting, surrounded by officials and witnesses, the centerpiece of a grand ceremony. He was the protagonist of his own play. But Musashi did not come to play a part. He arrived hours late. He arrived not in armor, but in rags. He did not carry a blade forged by a master smith. He carried a wooden oar, carved hastily on the boat ride over. It was a weapon of mockery. It was a rejection of the art of fencing. When Kojiro saw this, rage consumed him. The insult was too great. How dare this filth disrespect the sanctity of the duel? How dare he treat this moment, this stage, with such indifference? And in that moment of rage, Kojiro lost. He drew his magnificent blade and cast his scabbard into the sea. Musashi smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "You have lost, Kojiro," he whispered. "For if you planned to win, you would not have thrown away your sheath." Kojiro fought to prove he was the best. Musashi fought simply to end it. The clash was over in a heartbeat. The swallow cut sliced the air, cutting the headband from Musashi's hair. But the wooden oar, heavy, ugly, and real, crushed the skull of the golden boy. Kojiro fell, his beautiful robes stained with sand and blood. The crowd gasped. The legend was broken. Musashi did not gloat. He did not raise his weapon in triumph. He bowed silently to the corpse of Vanity, turned his back on the stunned crowd, and walked away. He left the island, not as a victor seeking applause, but as a man who had just proven a terrible truth. That style, fame, and reputation are nothing but mist before the crushing weight of reality. The golden idol was dead. The void remained. But let us not be deceived by the legends. Do not dare to romanticize this path. The road of the Ronin is not paved with rose petals. It is paved with broken glass. Musashi did not walk away from glory into a life of peace. He walked into a living purgatory. To choose solitude is to declare war on your own biology. We are social creatures, wired to seek the warmth of the pack. To deny that instinct is to tear at the very fabric of one's humanity. Imagine the nights. Not the poetic, moonlit nights of paintings, but the brutal, freezing reality. While the lords he despised slept under quilts of silk, warmed by charcoal fires and the bodies of lovers, Musashi slept in the hollows of trees. The winter winds gnawed at his joints. The rain turned his skin gray and cracked. Hunger was not a visitor. It was his constant, silent companion. He became a stranger to the warmth of human touch. He forgot the sound of his own laughter. As the years ground on, his body withered. The vibrant youth who stood on Ganryu Island became an old man, racked with pain, his hair matted, his smell offensive to the civilized nose. Why? Why endure such wretchedness? Because he knew that comfort is a slow poison. He knew that the moment you seek a soft bed, you begin to fear the hard ground. The moment you crave a warm meal, you become a servant to your belly. He stripped himself of everything, friends, family, home, comfort, until there was nothing left but the man and the void. It was a self-inflicted crucifixion. He had to destroy the human being to birth the spirit. He had to suffer the agony of the ghost, so that he could never be touched by the weakness of the living. He looked into the abyss of loneliness, and he did not blink. This was the price of his strength, a price that no amount of gold could ever pay. And so, the journey ends not in a golden palace, but in the stone belly of the earth, the Rigondo cave. The year is 1645. The demon is dying. Cancer is eating away at the body that 60 men could not kill. But as the flesh fails, the spirit solidifies into diamond. He does not call for a priest to absolve his sins. He does not call for a scribe to record his victories. He sits in the dim light, takes up a brush, and writes the Dokkodo, the path of walking alone. Among the 21 precepts, he carves a sentence that stands as a tombstone for all human vanity. Do not seek to possess goods or fiefs for your old age. Read that again. Feel the weight of it. In his time, a fief, a grant of land, a title, a steady income, was the ultimate goal of every samurai. It was the pension for a life of service. It was safety. It was the guarantee that you would die warm and fed. It was the very definition of making it. But Musashi rejected it. Why? Because he understood that the accumulation of things is the accumulation of fear. We spend our lives building nests, hoarding wealth, seeking titles, all to create an illusion of security against the coming dark. We think that if we own enough, if we are famous enough, we will be safe. Musashi saw through the lie. He knew that to rely on a fief is to rely on a lord. To rely on wealth is to be a slave to the economy. To rely on fame is to be a slave to the memory of strangers. He chose to die as he lived, with nothing, no safety net, no soft landing. In that damp cave, he declared that the only true possession a man has is his own mind. If you need a title to feel worthy, you are empty. If you need a heavy purse to feel brave, you are a coward. He stripped himself of the future just as he had stripped himself of the past, proving that a man who needs nothing from this world is the only one the world cannot conquer. Here lies the ultimate secret, hidden deep within the void. The world screams at you to be someone. It demands that you build a name, a reputation, a statue of yourself for others to worship. It tells you that if you are not seen, you do not exist. We spend our lives polishing masks, terrified that if we drop them, we will disappear. But Musashi knew that to be someone is to be a target. When you have an image to uphold, you are always under siege. You are always defending the walls of your own ego. You bleed to protect a ghost that lives only in the minds of others. You are heavy with pride. You are slow with anxiety. You are made of glass, waiting to be shattered by the slightest insult. The true master chooses to be nobody. When you are nobody, you have no walls to defend. You have no image to protect. The arrows of criticism pass through you like stones through the morning mist. You become formless. You become untouchable. This is the great paradox of power. The man who desperately tries to prove he is strong reveals only that he is weak. But the man who no longer cares what the world thinks, he is the one who owns the world. He has killed the desperate, screaming child within him that begs for attention. He has stepped over the corpse of his own vanity. And in that silence, he is finally free to move, to strike, and to live without the crushing weight of the mask. He walks through the crowd, but he is not of the crowd. He is the wind that cannot be caught. Musashi is gone. The flesh has returned to the mud. The hand that held the blade has turned to dust. The cave is empty, save for the wind that howls through the cracks of Regondo. History has washed away the names of the lords he refused to serve. The applause of the crowds at Kyoto has long since faded into the absolute silence of the grave. But the spirit remains. He stands today as the uncrowned king. He wears no gold, holds no title, and commands no lands. Yet, he commands the respect of the ages. He proved that you do not need the world's permission to be great. You do not need a pedestal to stand tall. So, listen closely to the silence he left behind. It is not empty. It is a roar. It is a challenge, echoing across 400 years. Stop looking for the light. Stop begging for the applause. Stop performing for a world that does not care if you live or die. Turn away from the noise. Walk into your own cave. Embrace the cold. Embrace the solitude. Forge your mind in the shadows where no one can see you. Let them chase the fame. Let them fight for the scraps of attention. You seek something else. You seek the steel that does not bend. You seek the truth that does not fade. Be the ghost in the machine. Be the silence in the storm. Walk alone. And in that aloneness, find the strength to stand against the world. This is the way.